Hey, so welcome to month number 3. This is our January edition, and lots of you are back for the third time, which is pretty awesome, and we appreciate it. And I've said it before, but this is a fair amount of fun for us. Todd gets to obviously play with the wines and figure out a good little game plan and see what he can get and all this interesting stuff, and then we get to make you some food, and as you know, Todd and I get to make some music playlists too, so that's always fun. So in any event, I will let, as always, the brains of the operation start talking, and he's going to get into the wines. And yeah, so here we go.
All right, welcome everyone. Third month, super excited. We've got some awesome wines for you. And I'm going to jump right into our first wine, which is the Domaine Moreau Naudet Chablis. Great, fantastic producer that's fairly new to the market. It's been around for about a year or so. Really cool wines, a slightly sad story. So this winery is a family winery, and in 1999 it was taken over from father to son. Stéphane Moreau took over from his father and immediately started to make some changes in the vineyard and the winery. Chablis is a wonderful wine. We all love it, but it's very much, for the most part, a status quo region where producers all kind of do the same thing. They don't hand harvest, they machine harvest. They use the same techniques in the winery and the vineyard, high yields. They pick early to get that really crisp style. And Stéphane Moreau does not do a lot of those things. He kind of marches to the beat of his own drum. His wines are definitely more similarly made to the wines of the Côte de Beaune further south in Burgundy, where he uses low yields. He handpicks everything. The wines see long, slow fermentations in old oak. The wines are ripe and full of texture, but still have this piercing acidity and this beautiful minerality. And yeah, I think the wines are brilliant. Unfortunately, Stéphane passed away very suddenly in 2016. He was young. I don't even think he was 50. And it came on quite suddenly, but his wife, Virginie, and his winemaking assistant have carried on for him and have not changed any of the principles that he was using in the vineyard of the winery, and the wines have pretty much stayed the same as they are. Yeah, what else can I say?
I have a question for you.
Yeah, please.
I have a question for you. When you say they use old oak barrels, how much life do you get out of a barrel generally? Like, keep using it, or is it 3 or 4 times? And when's the optimal, like, to get it old? Like, how does that work?
So I'm not a winemaker. I'll go by what I've learned in my travels. I don't know many producers that will use like French barrels or 225 liter barrels longer than 5 years. Because after the 4th or the 5th use, there's no oak flavor left, right? So that this is probably what they're using at this domain. Yeah, by the 5th use, there's 0 oak flavor left. On my recent trip to Tuscany in the fall last year, I visited a producer who said, and they have old oak, but like upright and large Foudre, or and she said that every 20 years or so she's got to refresh those. So yeah, they usually last about 20 years. I think if you repair them, I know like in Rioja and other regions where they use lots of old wood, they actually have coopers on site that will repair their old barrels, so they can last much longer if you're doing that kind of thing. But I think generally you can get 20 years out of a barrel before
So
there's
generally these guys, like this guy, wouldn't want to use a barrel that's not already like 4 or 5 years old because he doesn't want that oak. Am I right, or did I miss part?
No, for the most part, he does not use new oak, but when he needs to refresh his barrel program, like when a barrel has worn out, he will buy a few new wood barrels, not for oak flavor, but just because he needs new barrels.
Yeah.
And the wine that we're tasting is actually the only wine that sees new oak, and it's not because he wants that oak flavor. It's just because he needs to season the wines in his barrel program. So this Chablis bottling is the only wine that sees any new oak. And again, it's not for the oak flavor. It's just because he needs to introduce some new oak. They have 5-6 different parcels. They have an old vine parcel named La Prucyk, which is not classified Premier Cru or Grand Cru, but it has the same exposition as two very famous Premier Crus, Vaillant and Montmain. And so he actually bottles that separately, labels it as Vieille Vigne or Old Vine. Then he has parcels in Vaillant and Montmain, Monte de Tonnerre, and those are all Premier Cru vineyards. And then he has some holdings in Valmer, which is a Grand Cru vineyard. So some pretty awesome sites.
Mm. Right on.
So let's taste the wine. So the first thing I noticed off the bat is Chablis is usually a little bit more restrained. It's not a super aromatic wine, and this is no different. I mean, there's definitely a lovely perfume, but it's not really jumping out of the glass like Sauvignon Blanc would or Riesling. But when you get to that delicate aroma, usually on Chablis, I'm looking for lime, but that's really not what I'm getting here. Maybe I'm getting a little bit of lime zest, but definitely getting more orchard fruit like apple and pear, right? Which is a little bit riper for Chablis. Nice fresh fruit character. Underneath that, I'm getting a ton of mineral. I get crushed rocks and oyster shell. I'm also getting a little bit of a hint of peanut shell or like yeast, and that comes from the wine being aged on the lees or the dead yeast cells, which will give that aroma. Will also give the wine a little texture. Definitely some floral notes in here as well. Lots of white flowers, jasmine, baby's breath. Going back to that ripeness, there's tons of freshness. It's very crisp. It's very zippy acidity, but there's this round texture in the mouth that you just normally don't get with most Chablis, right? Most Chablis is very linear down the middle of the palate, whereas I find this is definitely like a rounder texture. All the same apple, pear, floral, all the mineral, maybe a touch of lime juice as well. Yeah, just a super cool textured wine. Really good amount of complexity for a Chablis bottling, and the finish for me just lingers, really pushed through. So
now, you gave me these wines last night, and we're doing this in the morning, and I wasn't thinking, and I didn't put the white in the fridge at all. So I'm getting it at room temperature. Am I gonna, because the temperature should be a bit higher or lower, and am I missing out on some flavor characteristics if the temperature isn't more ideal, like not room temperature?
No, actually, the colder the wine gets, the more diminished the flavors are. So at room temperature, I drink almost all my wines at the same temperature, which is at like cellar temperature, which is like 12 or 13 degrees. So
yeah,
whether it's champagne, which common wisdom tells you you're supposed to drink very cold at like 5 or 6 degrees or 7 or 8 degrees, or a big red from Napa Valley, which you're supposed to drink at 14 degrees. I drink all my wines at cellar temperature. So
right, yeah,
personal preference. In my professional opinion, it's better to drink it a little too warm than a little too cold, because it's the cold that's going to take away those beautiful aromas and the flavors.
Yeah, right on. Well, that was gorgeous, but I definitely got a lot of the that richness off the nose for sure.
Yeah. Quick touch on food pairings. So I'll do a shameless plug. This wine is going to be the Chablis that we pour by the glass at Oddfish in the summer, actually probably closer to the spring. We'll be moving to it probably within a month or two, and we'll have it. I don't know, we have 250 bottles or so we'll have it for a while. But yeah, I want something I don't know if it's quite rich enough to stand up to lobster, but maybe like some crab cakes,
Yeah.
you know, anything. We had a beautiful salad on that Etienne did last week or the week before. And I just remember that it had some seafood components. It had a lovely vinaigrette, and then he had taken an apple and he had done this beautiful dice, a very small apple. So you weren't getting big chunks, but you were just getting like these little bursts of apple flavor. So I
Yeah.
think that combination with the vinaigrettes, the apple, and some seafood interplayed with the salad, I think would be really cool with this wine.
God bless cooks that can dice very fine.
Oh man, he's a genius, that guy.
My soups, my mirepoix for my soup just turns into a stew. I'm like, okay, I'm not chopping any finer.
All right. All right, let's move on to wine number 2, Guimaro from Ribera Sacra, which is in Spain. A very cool grape variety called Mencia.
And Menthea would only be grown in that region?
I've never seen it anywhere else.
Yeah.
I'm sure that it is other places, but it's if it is, I've never seen it. What can I tell you about this winery? Owned by the winemaker Pedro Rodriguez, who has help from his parents. His parents still work in the vineyard every day. The winery officially started in 1991, but they've been making wines a lot longer than that, but produced in very small quantities for family and friends. They started by selling their wines in garrafones. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but that's their 20-liter glass containers that they would sell to their neighbors and their friends. They were one of the first wineries to join the Ribera Sacra DO when it was created in 1996. The word Guimaro means rebel in the local dialect, and it refers to Pedro's grandfather, who was known as a rebel in the village or in the region.
Fine line between rebel and crazy man?
Yeah, I think probably. There's a very famous winemaker in Spain named Raul Perez, and he's consulted for this winery. He's helped them bring their techniques, modernize them a little bit, and just help give the wine some focus. And I think this wine is very cool. Really old school approach in some regards. Very traditional organic viticulture. They only use wild yeast. They don't use any inoculation. They still foot trowel their wines, which I think is pretty cool. You don't see that very often. Mm-hmm. They use a little stem inclusion. So a lot of wineries, when they're making red wines, they'll put their grape bunches into something called a destemmer, which simply just takes the berries off of the stems that you get, and then they discard the stems, but they'll keep the stems in there because it gives a little bit more tannic structure. I quite often find a lovely spicy character with wines that see a little stem inclusion. Asian 5 spice comes to mind, kind of cinnamon, clove, that kind of thing. They only use old oak for this wine. Actually, I think this wine's aged completely in stainless steel, but for their other wines, only old oak. And little to no sulfur as well. So
I have a question for you. When you were talking about the consultant that they brought on to bring more focus to their wines, does that mean a focus for, every year is going to be like more of a pattern, more consistency, or what did you mean by that?
Well, I think every good business, every good person is always trying to get better. So I think maybe Raul Perez is definitely known for having wines that speak to where they come from. So I imagine he was brought on to help them understand the vineyards that they had access to, and they have several different labels. This is their entry level, their wine, which is delicious, aged in stainless steel. But some of their, and is the average age of the vines that go into this are about 40 years old. But I know that in different bottlings, they've got single vineyard parcels that have much more age on them, and he'd probably really been brought in to help really make those wines speak, right, and really showcase where they come from. One thing I really like about this wine is that it's only 12 or 12.5% alcohol in most vintages. So it's light, it's fresh. Let's have a little taste. So the nose, good amount of fruit right off the bat. I get lots of red and dark berry fruit, lots of cherry, a little bit of plum. Getting some of that spiciness that we talked about. There's lots of cinnamon and clove. There's an earthy character, lots of floral character in here as well, but purple fruits. I get like lilac and lavender.
It's very bright. It definitely jumps out on the nose for sure.
Yeah, it's not a shy wine for sure. Lots of crunchy, tart berry fruit. Lead pencil, again, all those floral characters, the spiciness, tart and crunchy, but with this beautiful upfront fruit character. Lots of minerality, which I didn't really talk about on the nose, but it kind of tastes like a little bit slatey or lead pencil-y. Very cool. Yeah, I think this wine is built for, you know, bolder, a lot of bold flavors in this. I think it could stand up to, you know, meat preparations that probably have a little bit of spice to them. Not anything that's crazy searing hot, but maybe like a little chorizo sausage. You
Yeah.
know, I think tacos might be really fun with this actually. You know, something that can stand up to some of those, you know, kind of chilies and, you know,
We've
know.
covered wines that go with burgers. I believe
Mhm.
wines that go with grilled cheese. Was that last time?
Sounds about right.
Or no, it was leftover turkey sandwiches.
Mhm.
And now we've got a taco wine. I love it.
You know, this would also go well with leftover turkey sandwiches with cranberry mayo. Mm. Man, that wine is delicious. I hope you guys like it as much as I do. All
But
right.
I kind of see this like this definitely has a brightness to it too. So and because of the low alcohol content, this would be a good like spring summertime wine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you wanted to hang on to this for a few months for patio season, serve it light chill. I think we talked about it with the previous wine. You know, we did open these wines yesterday so that you would have your wines for the tasting today. You know, I have a small little wine fridge that holds, you know, 30 or 40 bottles. And when I bring these wines home, I put all the wines into that wine fridge and I take them out just before we start tasting. So
Mhm.
all of my wines, including the white, are, you know, cool to the touch, but they're not cold.
Yeah.
So this wine is being consumed by me right now with a light chill on it, and for me it's perfect, right?
Yeah.
So if I was having this wine with some friends, what I would probably do is just take it out of my wine fridge. But like, say I was going over to a friend's house and they didn't have the luxury of a wine fridge, might keep it in the fridge for like 45 minutes before we drank it, or, you know, maybe keep it in ice for the first 10 or 15 minutes and then take it
Yeah.
off, so it just has
Mhm.
that little chill, because I think it just makes the wine show a little better.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wine number 3, Fabio Oberto, excuse me, Fabio Oberto Barbera d'Alba. Excited to have this wine. This is our newest glass pour at the Nook restaurants, and was brought in as an exclusive to our restaurant group. I think there's one retailer that's currently working with it, but we're the only restaurants that gets to work with it. Really cool story on this. So Fabio Alberto worked at his father's winery for 22 years before branching out on his own in 2017. Started his own winery, and his wines are all based in the commune of Lamoro, which is in Piedmont. Definitely known more for wines based on Nebbiolo, right? Barolo.
Mhm.
But he makes this wonderful wine, which I'm really excited to work with. I think it works really well with our food. It's only been in the restaurant for a few weeks, but the feedback has been fantastic. So I can't wait for you to try it and tell us what you think. what can I tell you? This wine comes from 3 small vineyards, all located within Lamora. The vines are an average of 25 years old. Pretty straightforward winemaking, destemmed fruit, crushed within a few hours of harvest, and then goes into stainless steel tank. A small amount goes into large old wood for about 6 months, and then the wine's blended together and then bottled. It's made pretty simply, but the fruit is very pure.
Is that typical for Barbera de Alba wines of some stainless, some oak, and then blending?
I think it's up to the winemaker. I think generally, like, no new oak is the rule of thumb, but yeah, I don't think it's uncommon to do a little in stainless, to kind of preserve that bright, fresh fruit character, and then age a little bit in wood to, maybe bring out a little roundness and a little texture, give it a little weight. So yeah, I don't think it's uncommon.
And I know you're not a vintner, but do vintners experiment a lot, like taking a little bit and saying, okay, I'm just going to, obviously not going to risk the entire production on it, but I'm going to do like this time 75% in stainless and 25% in oak, or, play around. Like, how much do they experiment, or are they always pretty much set in their ways? Or is it depending on the harvest and they got to save something or tweak something?
Yeah, I think all of those things. I think this generation's probably a little bit more open to experimentation than most of the last generation. I know that winemakers, from, like, say, Gen X, really communicate with other winemakers from the region and even from the world. I know I can think of a few wineries that have winemakers in Lamora and in other parts of Piedmont, where the current generation went off to Burgundy, or they went to California, or they went to Oregon, or they went, somewhere to work for a few years to see what they do, and then come back and bring those techniques back to the winery. So yeah, I think there is always a little bit of experimentation. I don't think they're going to risk the whole crop, but
Mhm.
I remember going to Burgundy a few years ago, and Bordeaux on the same trip. We were in France, and seeing these concrete eggs, at every winery we went to, and they didn't have a bunch. They just had 1 or 2 tucked away in a corner. But yeah, I think everybody's experimenting and seeing how they can do things a little different and
Yeah,
make their wines a little better, a little cooler.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
All right. So this wine, again, pretty aromatic on the nose. Lots of like this wine's really aromatic. It really jumps out of the glass. So lots of dark cherry, red cherry. Again, a little plum, floral character, but on this I get like a little bit more red flower, like rose petal. Lovely earthy character, and there's a slight, like, it's very subtle, but like almost like a meaty, like a charcuterie aroma on this,
Mhm.
which I think is quite cool. Subtle earthy note.
You can tell that I was a terrible student, right? You're like, okay, first you smell the wine, then you taste the wine. I'm like, I just dig right in.
You go at your own pace. This is fun. It's fermented grape juice. It's not supposed to be so serious. So how this wine differs from wine number 2, there's a lot of texture in this wine. This wine's round. There's a little bit more tannin as well, but still quite fresh. But there's a lot more body and richness to this wine, a little bit more concentration. Still lovely layers of red and dark fruit. I find the floral characters a little bit more pronounced on the palate. Not so much minerality, but again, like an earthiness, underbrush, a little forest floor. Lots of beautiful, refreshing acidity. And yeah, I'm really excited for this wine to be in our restaurants, because I think this wine, Barbera, always works so well with tomato-based dishes because of that freshness.
Mm.
And like a pepperoni pizza, or like a, sausage pizza with sweet peppers. Um, it just, that kind of tannic grip and that fruit concentration can stand up to those kind of spicy, meatier dishes. And yeah, I think it's just brilliant with a lot of the foods that we prepare at Nook. So
Would you ever be hesitant? Because we were just talking about a little more experimentation with the latest crop of vintners and the new, people coming along. Well, because they travel more and study more. And would you ever be hesitant if you found like one of the wine reps brought in a Barbera, and it was delicious, but it really didn't taste like Barbera. It was atypical for it. Would that make you hesitate, or are you just like, well, it's great wine, I don't really care?
yeah, I guess it would depend on what the flavor profile. Well, I'll give you an example. When I first started with working with you guys, there was a Barbera on the menu, but it was atypical. It was done a passamento style, and what that means is that the grapes have been taken to the winery whole, and then they've been dried. So a passamento is the style that they use for Amarone, where they dry the grapes out, and then they crush them. So they're essentially making some of the wine out of raisins, right? So by doing that, you get much more concentrated flavors. The flavor profile on this wine is like tart, ripe, fresh fruit, whereas the flavor profile in that Barbera was like dried, stewed, plummy, jammy. Way more texture, way more alcohol, a little bit of sweetness. Was it a good wine? Yeah. Did it work with the food? Yeah. But if I came in and ordered Barbera as a wine lover, would I be happy with that wine? Definitely not. Right.
Yeah,
So I
you
think
definitely need
yeah,
some interaction with the server to give you a
exactly.
heads up.
It's a conversation. So if I'm going to run a wine like that, it's more, if it was Barbera, it's probably going to be a feature wine where we talk about the wines a little bit more, not somebody's just coming into a restaurant and going, oh, I'll have the Barbera.
Yeah.
Because they tell every single guest that orders it, hey, this is great wine. However, it might not be what you're expecting. So we'd still work with the wines, but in a way where we could have a little bit more interaction with the guest and prep them for what they're getting.
Yeah, that's a good point. And how much audience? Todd drinks with a bunch of wine experts on a regular basis, and I'm sure they do lots of blind tastings and stuff like that. How often would someone try to dupe you? Bring the wine in a bag like you guys do, and try to guess? Do you guys play the game pretty straight up? It's like, okay, you should get this because this is typical of the wine, or do you have some person, probably like me, if I joined, I'd be like, I have to dupe these people. I'm going to bring this Barbera that tastes like a Rapazo.
So when we meet with our study group, I mean, we're studying for, knowledge, but we're also studying for exams, competitions, whatever the case is. More often than not, we're bringing wines that are very typical of what they're supposed to be. We're not trying to trick anybody, because in an exam and a competition, they're not trying to trick you. They're trying to test your theoretical knowledge. And although like some of those oddball wines are fun and I drink them and they're certainly delicious. I remember listening to a master sommelier talk on a podcast once about the wines that they pick for exams. And he's like, I'm not putting this wine into an exam unless I can bet somebody's career on it. Right. Because that's what it comes down to. Right. Like getting your MS designation and not getting it can mean make a huge impact on somebody's life, their earning potential. So generally, no, when we're studying for those exams, we're bringing in like classic examples, not trying to fool anybody. If we're out having lunch, then yeah, that's different. If we're just all sitting around having fun, then yeah, maybe we'll bring a bottle or two like that to have fun with. But in situations, no, it's always going to be classic.
So jackasses like me are not welcome in your group.
Oh, you're always welcome. You're always welcome. All right, so we're moving on to wine number 4, which I think is really cool. This is Chateau Jacques Noir from Saint-Emilion, Bordeaux. I got really excited when I tasted this wine a few months ago. It's only been in the market for a few months, and I just tasted as soon as it went into my glass and the aromas came out. I was like, man, this smells like Bordeaux. It took me back to my trip to Bordeaux. And I knew right away that I was going to find a way to work with it. So I'm glad that it's in the wine club this month, and I hope you all enjoy it as much as I do.
Is this
So
is this on our Oddfish menu?
it's not yet, but it's definitely going to work its way on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, within the next few months, you'll definitely see it on there. I know Scott really is excited to work with this wine as well.
Yeah.
So Chateau Jacques Noir, located in Saint-Emilion. The chateau was purchased by the Ducour family in 2001, and the property was maybe in a state of disrepair at the time. So they went in and they quickly went to work restoring all the vineyards in the winery. It took them about 10 years. The family has several holdings in different areas of Bordeaux. This particular property is about 5 hectares. So they make less than 2,800 cases of wine a year. So very small. The entire property is planted to Merlot. So it's what they do. This is the one bottling that they make. And I'll taste the wine in a second, but what I love, the story about this winery is very cool. Where the story, or where the winery gets its name from, is a local legend. And apparently the original owner of this estate was a winemaker and grape grower by day, but by night he would lead his men out into other parts of Bordeaux dressed in black armor, and he would raid his neighbors' farms and homes, and he would steal from them. And he painted his armor all black, and he was called Le Noir. So Chateau Jacques Noir is paying homage to the local legend that there was an evil knight that used to live at this property and painted his armor black and would go around pillaging and stealing from his neighbors.
So is that a story of myth, or is that a story?
Yeah, I think it says that it's a local legend. So I don't know if it's true or not, but they liked it enough to use it to name the winery. So who knows?
I like it. I like this wine already.
Yeah. So kind of a cool backstory. So let's talk about the wine. So on the nose, I get deep dark red fruit, black fruit, actually more black fruit than red fruit. I get leather. I get lead pencil. I get a touch of barnyard. I get some fresh herbs. The fruit character is ripe.
Like this wine would be pretty good for like being in one of those tastings going, this is Merlot.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, this is a dead ringer for wine from the right bank. There's a good amount of texture on this wine, but it's not rich or opulent. It's still got some verve, some freshness down the center of the palate. The tannins are quite firm. It's not quite as fruit driven on the nose as it is on the palate, or sorry, vice versa. It's more fruit driven on the nose. On the palate, I'm getting like more earth, more of that lead pencil, more of those savory herbs, kind of drying decayed flowers, growth, underbrush, leathery. Oh. That kind of greenness, that kind of like fresh herb, maybe a little bit of bell pepper, vegetal character really sings through on the palate as well.
This was this was definitely a logical progression because this is the mouthful of the four, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely the richest, definitely the most complex. Good, strong finish. One thing that's kind of surprising me as we're sitting here talking is that this wine is making me hungry. This wine makes me want to have some food. It's crying out for duck or steak or something. And usually I feel that way when I drink Italian wine, maybe even Spanish wine. There's a bitter quality to this wine in a good way that I haven't talked about, which I definitely usually get more in Italian wine. But yeah, this wine is like, you can easily drink this wine on its own, but for me, it screams it needs food. It's meant for the table. That's most of Bordeaux are. So, yeah. what a cool wine. I think that wine's awesome.
Um, so of our wines, well, we may as well talk about like what's happening food wise, because people now have their package, they have their they have their food. Um,
Yeah.
and let's start with the if you ordered the vegetarian option, it's the spinach and ricotta lasagna. And then, of course, the what we call the standard, but the meat option, which is probably 80% of the people order that. It's our classic bolognese style lasagna.
Mhm.
Now, would any of these wines work for both, or some wines like, I don't know, definitely just the veggie version? You know, what's your take on food pairing with their wines?
I think all of these wines will work with the red wines. I, I I think that all the red wines will complement the meat lasagna just fine.
Mhm.
Be great pairings, and I think they'll actually work with the lasagna as well because it's ricotta and spinach, is it not?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Spinach has quite an irony character, which I think will work well with like the mineral character of all of these red wines. I might be interested to see actually how the Chablis in that ricotta lasagna work, you know,
Mhm.
because you've got that kind of irony character, you've got the creaminess of the ricotta cheese, and then you've got the saltiness of the Parmesan that we sprinkle on top. And I really
Yeah.
think that Chablis has like the weight and the texture and the freshness to work
Yeah.
with all of those components. So I bet that Chablis and the veggie lasagna is going to be fantastic. Not to say that the reds won't work as well, but I wager that the Chablis is going to be an awesome pairing with that. Um, Me personally, I would love to see how this Saint Emilion works with that really meaty bolognese.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, I think the others would be fantastic as well, but and definitely not a classic pairing. You don't see, people saying, "Oh, I'm going to open Bordeaux and have lasagna tonight." But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it's, I think it's going to be a very cool pairing.
Yeah. And probably not many people think about this, but we have tiramisu as part of the package as well. So everyone gets a tiramisu to finish off with. Um, of these wines, what would you say of like, can you just save like, this much after your meal to have with your tiramisu? Would you of these wines, which one would you go, oh man, that would actually go nice with it? When we think of
You know,
dessert, we always think of ports and dessert wines, but wine, what are you vibing
I,
here?
I personally and professionally don't think that any of these wines are going to work that well. I love our tiramisu. I steal Chris Clark's line all the time when I'm describing tiramisu at Nook and tell them it's the best tiramisu in the world because I firmly believe that. I love our tiramisu, but our tiramisu does have a little sugar in it, and sugar is a wine killer. So the rule of thumb is that the dessert can't be sweeter than the wine, right? So the wine has to be as sweet or a little bit sweeter than whatever you're eating. So
Mm.
for me, it wouldn't work. Some people might like it, but for me, I think it would just kill the wines.
So you're thinking more of a, and obviously now we're offering this, but is that more of a tiramisu with port, or a dessert wine, or ice wine, or what would you go?
Yeah, you got lady fingers, you got espresso. I'd be very
Just
interested to see. I'm just trying to think of like offhand what we have. I think if I was in the restaurants and somebody asked me for a wine pairing for tiramisu, I'd probably go to Vinsanto first,
yeah, uh-huh.
right? For those of you that don't know what Vinsanto is, it is a wine that comes from Tuscany. That there's two types. The Vinsanto is usually made with white grapes, so Vernaccia, and they go the whole bunches of grapes go back to the cellar where they are dried for 4 to 6 months. Then the grapes are crushed, juice comes out. It's very thick. It's very sweet because it's made from raisins, and then that really thick sweet juice goes into an old or new chestnut barrel or oak barrel that's usually only about 50 liters or 100 liters, and then they put cement over the bung and they let it sit there for 8 or 10 years. And then what comes out is heavily oxidized. It's nutty, it's sweet, it's raisined. Um, and it's pretty much indestructible at that point. You can leave an open bottle on your liquor cabinet for 10 years and it's going to taste exactly the same. It's not going to go off. And I think it would work for both.
In all of our restaurants, because, well, not, yeah, at Oddfish too, we have quite a few. We have a lot of grappa. Does that go with anything or just regret?
That grappa can be everything from rocket fuel to life altering, and it's everything in between. I really like grappa. The first time I really understood grappa was when I was at Nook Denman, and I went in there to visit Phil and Linda, and they killed us with food. Like, we ordered some food and then they brought double the amount of food, and I ate so much, and that was a night I was full of regret. And then Phil walked over with a beautiful grappa from what's the name of the winery? Donna Fugata. It's the Mil
Yeah.
Notte, or Thousand
Yeah.
Nights. Slight chill on it. It's been aged in oak a little bit. It's got a little weight, a little complexity. He's like, drink that. And I drank it, and it was like, oh, I can eat another bowl of pasta. You know, it just pushes everything down and makes everything right in the world. So if you've never had grappa after you've eaten too much, have some. That's what it's there for.
But you know, something that Chris Royal, I'm not sure if it's commonplace for many restaurants, but Chris was with us from day one, and then he moved up to Penticton and opened his shop there. But the first, I was, you know, I don't know anything, but he threw the grappas in the fridge, and I must say that that to me was a game changer for grappa. Like, before room temperature, I do not enjoy them, but chilled, I most certainly do more. Is that atypical, or I just know
No,
that
there are some grappas that are meant to be chilled and show better that way, and there's some grappas that are meant to be served at room temperature. It just depends on the style of the grappa. Like right now, all the restaurants have a grappa from a winery called Nonino, which is in northern Italy. I think they're in Piedmont. I can't recall. But we have, and they make grappa from different grape varieties. And the one that we have is from the Moscato grape variety, right? So an incredibly floral grape variety. And we keep that in the fridge, right? Because it's so heady, it's so aromatic. The chilling actually tames that and calms it down a little bit. And then we have another one from a producer called Tedeschi, which is a single vineyard Amarone grappa that is aged for 1 year in oak before it's released. So whereas the Moscato is clear, the Amarone grappa is oxidized, so it's brown. And I think that wine, or that grappa, shows much better when it's served at room temperature, because you're getting the subtleties and the complexities that come with the oak aging.
Yeah, right on. Music.
Yeah, you put together a really cool playlist. I helped. 95% of the work came from Brad, but I've listened to that playlist about 3 times already. I think it's awesome.
Oh, right on. I added a few more last night, as you knew I would. You know, Todd came up with the idea. We were talking about music, like what we want to do for January, and he came up with a great idea. We were going to do more bluesy, but January's just been it's been a real good experience. So I wanted to get happy. So your music this month is it's just songs that make me either smirk or make me happy. So that's it. It's pretty light. I think there's some fun stuff. I don't know. I love putting it together. Todd helped, and actually one of our 3-time wine buyers of the wine club, Tyler, chipped in too. He had some ideas. So in any event, yeah, it's once again, don't take the music too seriously, but it's made. I made it with thinking, you know, you're going to be with a few friends on Friday, Saturday night, having some wine, and you want to have some fun with, have some fun. And there might even be a few sing-along moments, you know. There will definitely be It's Raining Men is one of the songs. So, you know, that's a definite guaranteed sing-along. So anyways, that's another edition of Wine with Todd. I love I think it's a wrap. Thank you very much. And we will enjoy, and we'll see you again in like the 3rd week of February. I think it's the week after the Super Bowl, which obviously I I focus my Februarys around. And so anyways, thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.
Ciao.